And welcome to the Commonwealth's very first ever Jack Views. So today we have SFA's College Democrats, and representing is Miranda Rawmaker de la Garza, Gabrielle Harris, Tyler Pratt, and Tommy Beck. And then we also have College Republicans, and representing for them is David Aguilar, Jack Lee, Bryce co-writer, and Amy Martinez. So today they're going to be discussing questions and topics that were sent in by you guys. So today we hope you guys find common ground, and that by the time you leave, you get a better understanding of everybody's point of views on these topics and questions. We ask that the audience, you guys please be respectful, and you guys really learn something and listen today. The way this will work is that each side will have 2 minutes to discuss the topic in question that has been submitted by you guys. And then once those 2 minutes is up, we're going to move on and we're going to continue. How do you feel about the idea of lowering or getting rid of tuition? We'll start with Republicans.
So my personal thoughts on it are the original price of college was raised significantly when the government started offering subsidies to colleges. Now, that's the reason why the price of tuition is so high nowadays. If you were to say that we should eliminate the price of tuition right now, first off, that's unfair to those who've already paid off their college tuition, right? Like, why should somebody who went to college 2 years ago work their ass off to pay their tuition? Why should they then have to pay for the college tuition of anyone going into college? That in itself is not fair. As for placing a price cap on tuition, that's something that I would need to research a little bit more.
For eliminating college tuition, you have to also think of the fact that you have to raise taxes to pay for that, which would, effectively bring the U.S. tax rate higher than it already is, paying for a lot of other things around the world. But by raising taxes, paying for college tuition, it would ruin the incentive to actually get out of college. Because why do you want to leave college? To get a job, to pay it off, to go upon your own life. If I can just stay in college for however long and someone else is paying for it, why do I care?
And also just talk about, even if we were to consider reducing or eliminating the price of tuition, would that just be for any major across the board? Can I then go and major in creative writing and have that paid for? I don't see how me as a taxpayer, if I'm not going to be giving back and contributing with my income that I make later on, how exactly is it fair that I just get my tuition paid for, and this is not me implying that those who take creative writing are taking a bad major. I'm sure there's some great creative writing majors at this school, but for those who are not going to take advantage of that major, they are not going to then contribute into the tax system. And it just seems like an unfair system. So at the very least, you should have rationing for which kinds of majors in this theoretical system where college is paid for. You should decide which majors specifically get paid for.
All right, that's time. Democrats, how do you feel about the idea of lowering or getting rid of tuition?
The fact of the matter is, currently in our current system, we have hundreds of thousands and millions of billions of dollars of debt.
Okay, yeah, I can finish it. So I agree, we obviously do have a lot of debt. And, in short, my answer is that education, in my opinion, is a human right. And then further, more, I understand the hesitation to free college, but I think at the same time it's not as simple as as it can almost be in like a 2-minute answer. And I think one way to explain that is, I'm not saying tomorrow I want to wake up and I want SFA to be 100% free. Because at the end of the day, whether we elect a Democratic president or whether we don't, that's not going to be the reality in 4 or 8 years. It's something that we have to work towards. And for me, that's another reason I'm in politics. I'm not in politics for me, I'm in politics because I want to make sure that people, the generation after me and my current generation, have opportunities, for things like college. And another, aspect that we're not thinking about here is not everyone goes to a 4-year university, right? Not everyone wants to go to a Stephen F. Austin or a Texas State University. Some people, I'm from Dallas, Texas, suburb of Dallas, McKinney. Right around the corner from my house is Collin College, and that's a shout out McKinney. That is a 2-year. I think it's kind of moving towards a 4-year, but. For my time, 10 years throughout high school, it was a 2-year community college. And the price of it obviously was low compared to a school like Stephen F. Austin or Texas State. But I think it's important to start looking at all of our options. So when I say education is a human right, I 100% wouldn't be in favor of, thank you, I 100% would be in favor of lowering or getting rid of the cost of tuition.
All right. So next question. What should be done about the student debt crisis? And we're going to start with you guys.
So personally, as someone who has taken out loans for college and who almost did not come back this semester because I couldn't afford to do college without taking out loans, I do think the student debt crisis is a huge problem. And I think lowering tuition, especially for middle and lower class citizens, is going to help with the student debt crisis, because if you look at the numbers, the minimum wage has not increased in the past 10 years. And college tuition has. And that is why people are in more and more debt and why we have trillions of dollars of debt across the board. And of course, I'm coming at it more of a personal stance because I did almost not come back, but I do think increasing taxes on the upper class and lowering tuition rates is what needs to be done to help that crisis.
And to, continue, we should not be asking people that are 17, 18 years old to take out thousands of dollars in debt just so they can get an education. And as I said earlier, I am firm in my belief that education is a human right. And the fact that we have people going into debt, coming out of college in amounts of debt that are inhumane almost, they are not buying houses because of that. Our economy is not working for everybody because of the amount of debt that students are going to accumulate while they are in college. So in order, in my opinion, for our economy to work for everybody, canceling student debt or canceling at least the majority of it would help with us buying houses, us contributing more to our economy. Because if I don't have student debt, I'm gonna start a business. I'm gonna do whatever I can because I have extra money in my pocket and I'm not concerned about having to consistently pay back student debt, which also accumulates interest.
Okay, so I currently owe $60,000 in student debt. From attending 4 years, because I come from Southside San Antonio, and when I graduated high school, my dad looked at me and said, "Hey, there's no way we can pay for your college." I joined ROTC for 2 years to help pay for that program, to pay for a little bit of that. But when I left that program, and I knew I wasn't going to get that, I was making a decision not to get that ROTC money anymore. I had to figure out a way to pay for college. My fiance, on the other hand, she comes from an even worse situation than me, and she's found opportunity after opportunity after opportunity to pay for her school, and she's going to be commissioning this May, as a second lieutenant in the United States Army as a nurse with 0 student debt. And it's all about seeking opportunity. In America, we have more opportunity for education benefits than any other country in the world. And I say that because I've been to other countries like Germany, where education isn't a choice. You don't have a choice of going 4-year degree. Your school and the state makes that decision whether you are going to profit towards society by going on to a 4-year degree.
So I think college definitely is a choice for us here, and we chose to pursue higher education. So when I think of this in terms of fighting the national debt crisis, I see this in terms of fiscal responsibility and personal responsibility. So if you chose to come to college, you chose to invest in yourself by furthering your education, and therefore you should be responsible for your own loan debt because you chose to invest in yourself. And if maybe your field that you go into isn't making that money that you want, and you are not making enough to pay your loan debt, then that comes to the choice that you made in going to that field. A lot of people nowadays are following their passion, but you know, the fact of the matter is you might suck at it.
And to go back on something, as Joe Biden said, my esteemed colleague here said, you can declare education a human right. You can declare anything a human right. That doesn't necessarily make it. I've heard people declare that internet access is a human right, that clothing's a human right. Just because something is nice to have, and doesn't mean that it's something that just because you were born doesn't mean that you're entitled to. And I feel like as a nation, entitlement is something that we especially are set on. Okay, yeah, time's up.
So for the past 10 years, the federal minimum wage has been $7.25. We believe that the federal minimum wage should be raised.
With minimum wage, I think there is a misconception about minimum wage in America. The way I personally see it is when you accept a minimum wage job, as most minimum wage jobs are, you're accepting an entry-level position. You, at any company, whether that be McDonald's or, for my case, Domino's, you're accepting an entry-level position. There's an idea that once you get that entry-level position in whatever company you're going in, you are expected to advance within that organization. And there's why I support raising the minimum wage for many Americans. I don't believe that we should be burdenizing or hurting companies that are trying to employ millions of Americans at the same time.
And to add on to that, also the idea that a flat minimum wage of $15 an hour, that's going to be enough. That's what we need. I mean, if you go to somebody who's living in New York City right now, and you say, I'm willing to offer you $15 an hour, they're not going to be able to scrape by, because living in New York City is extremely more pricey than, say, living in Dallas, Texas, or living in Nacogdoches, Texas. So there's that. And on top of that, whenever you engage with employment with a employer, you are engaging in a contractual relationship. You have the ability, let's say, to accept the job or not to. So that's on you whether you want to negotiate a higher wage or accept that job or move on to another one.
I think that we have to, I think one thing that when we talk about the federal minimum wage, a lot of times we're thinking it in the context of, you're just a 16-year-old, why do you need $15 an hour? What are you going to do at $15 an hour at 16? You're in high school. Your parents pay for your expenses. But I think the reality is that a lot of people that have minimum wage jobs right now have families. And they not only have families, they have responsibilities, they have medical expenses. So entering into a minimum wage job with $7.25 an hour, if you have to provide for a family, that's $7.25 an hour alone is not going to help put food on the table for children. It's not going to help, new shoes for kids that grow out of shoes very fast, clothing, things of that nature. And I think that, again, when we talk about minimum wage, we can't just assume that it's all college students or high school students that are working these jobs. Because if you go to the restaurants around here, fast food restaurants around here, Walmart around here, it's people that live in Nacogdoches, people that live like I said, in Nacogdoches, adults, people that have families that may have even gotten an education from SFA. How can they pay down their student loans on $7.25 an hour?
So you mentioned families. I'm going to try to walk this through like a student's point of view. When we think of somebody who has just graduated from university, there's some people who don't have that backbone, that family that they can come back to and help them get back on their feet and hopefully get an apartment, get a house, get a job. Usually people take a Cane's job or a Whataburger job. we often forget that, and this can go back to student debt, but you know, when you're paying for rent and you're by yourself and you're working a minimum wage job, you've got so much expenses plus, you know, the added student debt. I think that we have to, it's kind of ignorant to not look at the other situations that specifically young people, students are facing due to the low minimum wage.
What is your view on immigration and what would be the ideal immigration reform? And then also, what does building the proposed border wall mean to you?
So just to start, my view on immigration simply is that, you know, before we get into policy, I think we need to realize that people that are immigrants are also humans. And for far too long in this country, we have not been treating those that are immigrants as if they are human beings. We refer to them, not we, you know, there have been situations in which immigrants have been referred to by the most disgusting of names when this country is comprised of people from all shores. And we have to realize that because of immigration, because of the immigration we have in this country, we're stronger, not weaker. And then as far as the border wall, I do not agree with it. I do not think that is a smart investment, especially being a Texan. I do not think that is a smart investment. I think as Texans, as citizens, as Americans, we need to start looking at building a bigger table and not a taller fence.
Okay, there's so many things that I can say. I'm from the Valley, and I have firsthand seen, like I said, we can talk about so many things, but one thing I'd like to mention is like migrant camps and how people are, the conditions that people are being held over there. Obviously, I totally oppose a border wall. If there's going to be a wall, then people are going to build ladders.
So when it comes to immigration, I feel like there's a common misconception between national sovereignty and racism, and it's just a blur there. A lot of people will say that deportation and the immigration crisis is racist, when in fact we are just securing our borders. And if you want to say that deportation is racist, then we can look at it in terms of different administrations' immigration. For example, under the current administration, there has been 800,000 deportations so far, but during the entirety of the Obama administration, there was 1.18 million deportations. And so I think that the difference here is of national sovereignty, and we're just trying to build our borders to just secure our nation on all ends, and that the border crisis is just that of national sovereignty and is not an issue of racism.
And just to add on quickly to some of what she was saying, you also have to look at it from a practical perspective. I mean, the idea that all of these illegal immigrants are equally contributing to, let's say, the economy, for instance, in the same way that an American citizen does, is just factually not correct. Right here, and these are a little bit old statistics, so take it with a grain of salt, but in 1992 it was recorded that they paid over $290 million in taxes, but generated a $456 million deficit. Which resulted in a $166 million deficit.
So, on top of all that, the idea that the administration does not see immigrants as people is just not true. Donald Trump and whoever you may be talking about, seeing people who are coming over the border illegally, they're not seen as animals, they're not seen as not human, they're just not here legally, they're not here to contribute to the country the same way everyone else is, and if they come here illegally, what's going to stop them from breaking more laws?
A little bit more, on immigration that I would like to say. I didn't get to talk about what my dream policy essentially would be. And at the end of the day, I cannot make a dream policy for immigration. It's an issue that at the end of the day it is not, in my opinion, and it should not be a political issue. It's a human rights issue. And whether or not you see that from the Republican lens or the Democratic lens, leaders of both parties have made this point clear. It should not be something that we're at each other's necks about, because it's legitimately a human rights issue. So as much as I would love to paint my own perfect, amazing immigration policy, for me, I would not be able to do that, because I might have opinions, and though maybe part of my policy would be not building a wall, at the end of the day, no immigration policy is going to be perfect. And as Annie addressed, there was over 1 million deportations in the Barack Obama administration, and I find that absolutely horrific as a Democrat. And though obviously I do support Barack Obama, I did not support that over 1 million deportations because, as I said before, this is should not be politicized as much as it is. It's a human rights issue.
We can talk about statistics, and we can talk about who does what and how we view certain people or how certain people in power view people, but at the end of the day, I do not think that there should be children at the border separated from their families.
So something that I would say to that is, first off, you have to look at the idea that almost everybody wants to come to America south of the border. We're not just talking about through Mexico, we're talking about all South American countries, and also from a lot of European and Asian countries, because America is the greatest nation on the planet. We know this. So a lot of people want to come here, and it is not just the right, but the responsibility of any sovereign nation to be able to control who comes into the border. And I agree that has become a partisan issue, and I don't think that should be the case. And if you wanted to talk about increasing like living conditions in these ICE detention centers and making it a more humane way to live, I don't think there's anything wrong with that. But inherently saying that America should just allow anybody to come in that wants to, or just anyone that's already here, despite what they're contributing, what their actions crime-wise may have done, to ignore all that is just, it's not practical for the people who are already living here, and all those who already were in line and earned their status in the United States.
So, explain your view on the DACA legislation, and does your view change knowing that your peers may be affected? So we'll start with y'all.
As far as DACA legislation, and this might just be ignorant on my part, I don't believe that there's any legislation in the House or Senate currently active on DACA, but my opinion on DACA is that it's absolutely necessary and that it should be instated in the United States of America. This has helped not just many of my friends, but so many individuals in the country. And I think I'm happy that you brought up the point of that it might affect people because, like I said, earlier, sometimes people don't realize that these issues are affecting people. When they're affecting, people, we have to look at it from a standpoint that's less political and look at it more from a standpoint that is human. And so, absolutely, I feel that if in the event that DACA would be a bill in the United States House of Representatives and then move to the United States Senate, I would absolutely lobby for it because it's necessary. And then it kind of also goes back to education. When we discuss education, and again, in my view, it being a human right, it's a human right, and human does not stop at United States citizen. That goes to immigrant as well. And so I believe that those that are here in our country should be able to receive an education.
So last semester, I know Texas Rising put on a protest for DACA and DACA recipients. And if you were there, I was lucky enough to be there. I got to hear some of the most amazing stories, a lot from people who I hold dear to my heart, who are DACA recipients. Just exactly like what Gabby said, I don't think that it should be viewed as, politics or policy or simple legislation. These are people's lives. These are people who are spending so much money. I mean, I have talked to a lot of DACA recipients, and the majority of them are by themselves in this country and are, supporting themselves and have 2 jobs and still are some of the most hardworking people I've ever met with the highest GPAs. And I know I'm out of time, so I'll just...
Personally speaking, I feel like there is a misconception that just because you support a strong southern border and strict immigration policies means that you necessarily have to disagree with DACA. And this is just my personal perspective, that I'm personally not necessarily opposed to giving people who've been here for a little while and who have definitely proved their worth and are hardworking Americans, well, not legal Americans anyway, giving them citizenship here. At the same time, though, declaring that we should be giving all these social services benefits to people who have not earned a citizenship here, first off, obviously not practical. It's hardly practical even for those who are legal citizens. But again, declaring anything a human right doesn't make it a human right. Are you going to then spend your American dollars on people living in Syria to provide them education? I mean, there's charity, sure. I mean, charity is fantastic, but declaring it that it needs to be a right through point of a government gun, that's not equatable. You can't do that. At the same time, though, I do agree that people who have been here for a little while and prove that they are hardworking people, sure, I'm okay with that.
So do you believe that the creation of caucuses on campus influences diversity at the university? Why or why not?
Can I ask what caucuses you're referring to?
Black Student Caucus, LGBTQ Caucus, and Latinx.
Well, why I think it's important for people every person to have a place where they feel like they belong and feel as if they have a voice to talk about issues that they believe in. Like, I'm a part of the First Amendment Club and YCT and even College Republicans, and through those organizations I get to have a voice. I don't believe in creating separations between people or between races or between sexual orientation. I think if a caucus is created towards that, I would not support it.
I mean, and I don't see anything inherently wrong with allowing people who have common interests and common struggles to unite together. I mean, me personally, I'm part of the Jewish Student Union, and the kind of understanding with that is that we share not just a common, ethnic Jewish, basis. We also share common values and common struggles that we've had to overcome. The large amount of anti-Semitism across the world, not to mention in the country itself. So I don't see anything inherently wrong with allowing coalitions to join on campus.
So I respectfully disagree that with you that caucuses create divisions, because personally I am part of the LGBTQ plus Equality Caucus, and you don't have to be part of the LGBT community to come to those meetings. I also think that, and this is a strong opinion I have, not having a problem with something is not the same as being in favor of it.
I'm in favor of it.
Then you should say that instead of I don't have a problem with it.
Wording.
But as a member of the LGBT caucus, I personally, even though I'm not able to make it to every meeting, I know I have a strong backbone of people behind me that support me and care about me for who I am and what I believe in, and that brings people together. It doesn't divide us off from other people. I see random people all the time, and I'm like, hey, how are you? Because I know them from these things I'm in. And it gives you more people to know and care about. And that's why I strongly agree with creating caucuses on campus.
Okay, so before I begin, I just want to give a really big shout out to the Black Student Caucus for being the first student caucus at SFA and paving the way for LGBTQ plus and Equality Caucus and Latinx Caucus. As the political action coordinator for Latinx Caucus, I will say that through these caucuses, for instance, there's a lot of organizations at Black SFA, and I know that the Black Student Caucus is kind of like a vessel to bring these organizations together. And basically a caucus is just getting together with people who share the same ideas as you and talking about what you would like to see change. And that can be in the country or, for instance, for us on campus.
Yesterday there was an open forum to discuss the $5 per semester grading fee and how the money will be used. Do you think the campus will benefit from the $5 charge on students' e-bills?
So as a member of Student Government Association, I'm very biased towards this because our amazing president, Scarlett, I don't think is here, I don't know, I can't see her, but our amazing president did introduce this legislation. So I do have a little bit of a bias, but from my standpoint as well, I 100% agree that this is going to help benefit the campus. And I think also, this was a student vote, and overwhelmingly over 1,300 students voted in favor of this. So it's going to help make sure that we keep SFA beautiful. We have one of the most beautiful campuses. No matter what conference or convention I go to in the state of Texas, everyone tells me that SFA is a beautiful campus. And we should be doing everything that we can to ensure that the campus that we go to school at, the campus that we will be graduating from, is as beautiful as everyone believes it is, and that we keep it at that standard. So I 100% agree with the green fee.
I also 100% agree with the green fee. I would pay more than $5 if it meant keeping this campus looking as beautiful as it is. Especially since we're the only place in the state of Texas with every single native Texas tree. I would like to add that. And that takes maintenance. And if you look at the trees outside, there's a tag on each one. We are a very environmentally involved campus, and I think that everyone should care about that.
Very good.
I think this is something I can also say that I am on common ground with, being also a member of student government on campus. And just seeing the activism coming out of students and going out to vote for this, it was just so great to see. And personally, I see it as a great way also to increase campus beautification as a whole. And implementing this definitely will start giving us that platform to have those greener initiatives on campus.
So I actually voted no for the. I'm probably the only person who doesn't 100% agree. While I like the idea of the green fee, and I like the purpose of why the green fee is being created, I am someone who believes in not mismanaging money. And whenever I would ask someone who was promoting the green fee where the money was going to, it just sounded a little shady to me. Like, oh, we're going to promote economic green diversity on campus. Okay, how are we going to do that? There wasn't really an answer. So why I support it? I wish maybe someone had explained the idea or how the green fee was going to functionally work, and also I had a fear that the funds could, and this very easily fear, be misused by other departments.
I mean, yeah, personally, I didn't have a problem with the green fee. I mean, I like an extra $5 in my account as much as the next person, but you know, I was a Boy Scout. I loved nature and all, but yeah, I didn't really have a problem with it. So.
A year ago, a group of SFA students were involved in an alleged police brutality incident at the Overlook. Do you believe police brutality is an issue? Why or why not?
Well, I mean, to ask if it's an issue, I mean, yeah, of course it's an issue. The question, I guess, to phrase it differently would be: is police brutality a systematic problem in the police department and in other branches of government? And in that, I would say that there's going to be, you know, bad people, bad eggs in any organization. And obviously, officers who engage in police brutality, they should be given strict disciplinary action, you know, obviously when the brutality is not needed in order to protect the police officer's life, you know. Other than that, though, you know, I live at the Overlook, and yeah, no, it did not exactly do wonders for me wanting to renew my rent there to hear that that happened there. So that's what I would have to say to that.
So I'm just going to point this out quickly because I think there are a lot of bad police out there. I think there is a system to deal with those who are misusing their authority. When you're given a badge and a gun, you are given an authority. You are held to a higher standard. And I believe that standard is being met in America. And I believe cops that are not being met to that standard are being very fastly taken out of the force. To speak to the issue that happened at the Overlook last thing, I understood the outrage of so many students, and I agreed with the outrage. But I also saw a lot of problems on both sides and I didn't think it had to be an issue as big as it was.
Okay, so my short answer is yes. Police brutality is absolutely an issue in this country, in this state, however you would like to frame it. And I do want to go back to something my colleague said. And though I do agree that there are some bad apples in the police force, we should not just be accepting that as normal. We should be talking about the fact that if there are bad apples in our police force, maybe there's a different way that we should look at policing. And we should not be policing, or sorry, I'm not going to say we should not be policing communities, but and look at how we are policing communities. There's an opportunity here to have a discussion about operationally defining terms. And it's, if one person is talking about police and they think, Americana, I can call on you, you are safe. I see you as safe. And when I talk about police, I mean fear, I mean terror, I mean, is this my last day on this earth? It's gonna be a little bit hard to find the common ground because we see police completely different. And that's why, again, just kind of bring it back into the overall sense. I'm glad that this is a conversation in an event because I'm never going to be able to understand the perspective if all I do is attack and assume that you're a racist cop sympathizer. When in the event, obviously we heard their answers, they're not. However, if you think I'm just like, forget police, to get rid of the police state, obviously that's not the case. It's just, I believe how we look at policing should be seen differently, and how police are trained should also be seen differently, because like I said, if I see police, my first thought is not that they are there to protect me. And though I wish I could change that, my experiences with cops and police officers has never been the most positive experience that I've had, and so that's my perspective.
I don't have a lot of time, but I will say that I don't think that this should be a partisan issue. We should all come together and acknowledge the fact that black and brown bodies are being put at risk when they're being stopped by cops. There's so much I can say, but it just needs to be an acknowledgement that we all come to terms with.
Just really quick, we're not saying that we don't think it's a problem, we don't think there's something wrong with it. We completely, I can say for a fact that most people would say that police brutality is, or at least should be, met with the full force of the law. And I think it is in most cases. Just a few that you hear about are the ones that are, like I said, few and loud. But on top of that, I don't think that, it's obviously not a partisan issue whether police brutality is a problem. No one likes it. And I think one thing that needs to actually change is that people view the police as such a bad thing when your likelihood of having a negative encounter is very little to none if you're not breaking the law. That's just a fact.
Yeah, hold on. Let me add on to that first. It's also important to note that police officers, they're obviously out there risking their lives, and while some of them, they have racial biases towards people they don't like, and people like that should probably not be allowed into the force. If you want to say there needs to be training to test for these kinds of biases, nothing wrong with that. At the same time, though, do not pretend to know the stress that comes with being a police officer in everyday life. You don't know when a car that you pull over could be the last car that you pull over. And it's important, for some of these instances of police brutality, misuse of police force, some of them are just the cop was anxious and was unable to do his job properly because he felt he was under threat. Now, some of that may be as a result of racial bias, and again, that feeds into proper training. And it's also why I'm in favor of body cams on cops, so that we can properly assess each situation on a case-by-case basis.
So though I agree with you, I don't understand what it's like to be a cop. I never will, because I never will be a cop. However, I think that one thing that is very important is though cops do risk their lives day in and day out, and though I am thankful for that, we have to go back to the operationally defining terms of though you might see a police officer wearing the blue and protecting you, whenever I see that, in every instance that I've had with police, that's not been the case. And I, again, 100%, respectfully disagree, but just to kind of add the contrast, though you might believe that the, interactions that are negative with cops might be little, for me and for people in my community, they are large. And I think that, again, if we are not coming to a point where we're understanding that and we're really trying to dig deep into the issues that some police officers have. And absolutely, as you said, there might be cops with a racial bias, but we shouldn't brush that off. We need to actively be training cops with some kind of community, I want to say community standard and community training, so that they understand that if you approach me, why I might immediately be hostile is nothing to do with the cop, it's what it has everything to do with my experience with cops.
That's already a thing. It's called community policing. It's been around since the 90s, and it's been implemented by department and department. The problem is there's no national standard for policing. There's not a national standard for policing. So if you want to talk about creating a national standard for policing, we can have a dialogue about that. But going instantly on attack cops and making people fear-mongering cops is only adding to the problem. It's not detracting from it.
And a lot of the police in these lower income communities that you see instances of police brutality happen, not all of them are a white cop shooting a black cop. A lot of them are, there's a lot of African American police officers within lower income cities. And sometimes that gets brushed over in the media. And I also just want to go really quick. Nobody's brushing off police brutality. That is not an issue that should be brushed off. I don't think it's an issue that is brushed off.
Okay. So do you believe white privilege exists, and what is your perspective on it?
Okay. Obviously, this is a difficult issue for people to talk about. I will say that making assumptions based off of people's hardship, just based off of their appearance alone, making judgments about people's ideology and the struggles that they have strictly based off of their skin color is things that Martin Luther King advocated against. And on top of that, I would say you wouldn't know it by looking at me, but I am Jewish. I'm not going to insert that I have Jewish privilege or anything opposing that, but there's issues in every single community. For example, in the Jewish community is one of the most targeted groups for hate crimes in America. And on top of that, there's issues of drug use within white communities that don't necessarily happen in black communities. So every community has their own issues that they need to work through.
I will say that I do not think that white privilege exists. And I will say that based on the fact that when I sign papers, I do mark that I'm Native American, I don't mark that I'm white. I get, less of a chance of getting hired if I mark that I'm white. That's just a fact. And the idea that white privilege exists, that I have, people biased for me because of my skin color, that is one, obviously racism should not happen. And two, if you think that you were being biased against because you're not white, you can file that as a racial lawsuit, and then if you have a problem with that, you can come through and 9 out of 10 chance you'll win that case if it's true.
There's also the issue that it's impossible to be racist to white people, just because it has something to do with a balance of power or something like that, because whites are the dominant power struggle that you can't be racist. I don't see that being the case. And I also see that there's like a certain media bias where, and I think it's great that there's more people of color in the media and in news and things like that. However, I think that kind of bias against them is still an issue to work through.
I absolutely believe white privilege is a thing, and I do check my privilege. I am a white woman. I have no shame in that, and I do wish that we weren't as privileged as we are, because little story time. I used to work at a store, and a manager told me that they hired me over somebody because of their skin color, and I felt disgusted, and I didn't want to work for that person. And you saying that that you have less of a chance of being hired for being white, for me, that doesn't quite make sense to me.
That's anecdotal, though.
That doesn't quite make sense to me, only because I have experienced that privilege, and I do not agree with it. I do not think that anybody should take precedence over anybody because of their skin color. And I could just talk about this for a while, but I'm going to let my colleagues go.
I'm going to just add a quick thing before I let Gabby go on. Being a part of a system doesn't necessarily make you racist, but admitting we have white privilege is admitting that there is a systematic system going against marginalized communities. And it is very important that even as white people, we have to recognize that the system abuses other people for the benefit of it.
So very quickly, I just want to kind of talk about privilege within the word itself. Privilege does not necessarily mean that you're viewed as better than I. I think it more so has to do with what you don't have to go through. So Kyle, I'll just ask you, whenever you applied to SFA, what was the number one thing you looked at?
Honestly, just if they had what I did.
Okay, number one thing I looked at was how many black people went here. Because at the end of the day, if I'm going into a space where, if I'm going to a school where I don't feel as if I'm represented, I'm not going to go there. And so that's why, again, going back to caucuses very quickly, I'm proud to be able to see Latinx Student Caucus, Black Student Caucus, and the LGBTQ Caucus, because it proves that we have that representation, and then it also shows that SFA cares enough to make sure that we have that, right? So again, it's not about what you have gone through, it's about what you don't have to go through.
Oh, okay. This is also another opportunity to address anything that has been said. So if you want to go off of anything, go for it.
So first off, when you were sharing your story, I didn't mean to cut in, but if we're looking on a statistical basis, there are instances statistically of whites being discriminated against in the workforce. And, you know, of course, this is not to discount the issues that people of color have historically faced. However, if you truly want to make it an even level, this means that you can't turn around and do it back. If we want to create an even platform where all people in America can succeed regardless of skin color, that means not fighting for advantages. You can argue that these advantages are necessary because people are discriminated against. However, I believe currently we're moving in a more and more progressive way, and as such, fewer employers. I can't speak on whatever employer you had, but I feel like the majority of employers, especially corporations, find it is economically beneficial to have a diverse board of directors. And in some ways, people will give preference to people of color and of gender and things like that because they want to have a more diverse thing. So in a way, that is working against people who have primarily been in positions of power based on race and gender.
I just want to add real quick that I grew up in a very poor community, and me and my best friend had these same opportunities growing up, and we fought for the same beliefs and what we wanted to do with our lives, and we were never discriminated against because of the color of our skin, and we were never given extra opportunity because of the color of our skin. So I find the idea that I'm given more opportunity based on the color of my skin is just false.
I just want to add a little to yours, because you did mention that people find it economically gaining to have a diverse board of directors. I don't think having a diverse board of directors, I don't think the goal of that is the economic gain. I think the goal of that is representation, because so many people are not represented fairly, and when people look up and they see that they're being represented, that brings more hope to people that have been discriminated against in their past, that have not had the same opportunities as white people have. And I think labeling that as something used for economic gain is, I disagree with that.
Can I respond to that? So the reason to have a diverse board of directors is you have diversity of thought, diversity of experience. And when you have people in a room together who may not necessarily agree with you, you're not just, telling the emperor that he has no clothes on, right? The entire purpose is to fill a room with people who may disagree with you based off of their experiences. And that is economically beneficial. Statistics show that corporations that have high diversity board of directors tend to succeed more.
I'm gonna agree with actually both of you, because I agree with Kyra's point that representation on a board of directors is extremely important, but the benefits of that representation do come through economic gain. So just to, again, try and find the middle ground here. But again, just speaking back on the topic of privilege, like I said earlier, it's not about what you have been through, because I'm not gonna sit up here and say white people have had it easy, because I know that's not true. But however, you have not had it hard just because you're white. However, again, when I wake up and I look in the mirror every day, I have to make sure that what I wear and how my hair looks and how I do my makeup is not, I make sure how I represent myself is not representative of my entire race. And however, and again, I don't know your experiences personally, but I do know that there, in my lifetime, and I can't speak for every black person in this room, but I'm sure that I can speak for some, is that how you are seen is how your entire race is seen. And that's absolutely ridiculous, and I think that personally, white people do not have to go through that, and if they do, they don't have to go through it nearly the extent that I do, because for me, it's an everyday thing. It's an everyday conversation with myself.
Okay, so this next question is a question for people of color. So what is your experience on being a person of color with your individual views?
With my individual views, so this is actually, I really appreciate this question. Obviously, I'm a Democrat, definitely lean towards the leftist wing of the party. And I've been accepted through my community and through my family. I've never had to worry about coming home, talking about my political beliefs, and my dad saying, you know, I can't believe you believe that, whatever. I have 100% support system behind me in my party, within my community of specifically black people, black women especially. I know I have that support system, especially, you know, as I said, with my beliefs. I do, and I think within that itself, is a privilege that I'm able to carry. Because like I said, I don't have to go home. I'm not nervous. I'm not scared ever to talk about my political beliefs. Call my dad every day to talk about politics. And it's always good, you know, productive conversations. Unfortunately, for people that look like me, that might lean more moderate or might lean more conservative, that's not the experience that they have. And so I can't walk in their shoes, but I can say I'm very grateful for the support system that I have and the support system that I'm given. And I mean, even the friends that I have that are here tonight, like, it's truly amazing that I have people that look like me that also support me and that also have my views. But I, again, understand that not everyone that looks like me has my views and they're not accepted, not just within their own party, but within the other party or within their family or things of that nature.
So I think that I can't speak for every Hispanic person, but I do know that there are some, you know, differences of views because we tend to look, or traditionally we tend to look with our religious values rather than like political views. And I feel that there's so much I can say and I don't want to be rude, but in 2020, back to the immigration question, I think that everything that's happening at the border, it has made me and people who look like me more kind of opening our eyes to what's going on and kind of putting our religious like values aside that tend to be more conservative and focusing on how the current system is treating people that look like us.
I just am going to kind of turn this more into, well, with my personal beliefs and in my party, in the Republican Party, because obviously I'm Hispanic and a Republican, we do exist. I just don't believe that because I'm Hispanic, that means I have to be a Democrat. And growing up, I was told I was a Democrat, and it wasn't until I started taking government and economics courses that I was like, well, I don't necessarily agree with like the argument on that the left is presenting. And so I just don't believe that because of my skin color that I should have to align with a certain party. I believe that we should be free thinkers for ourselves, and being a free thinker, anybody can think freely for themselves, and that just doesn't necessarily mean that the color of your skin defines what party you belong to. And that's just the great thing about college too in general, is that we are here to learn how to think and not what to think. And so that's kind of how I bring my viewpoints in when I'm with the Republican Party.
I'm not a person of color.
Last semester, the Pylon reported on your organizations regarding lack of representation. Do you feel represented on campus?
Last semester, I was president of Pacific College Democrats, and now I'm fortunate enough to serve as statewide president for all Texas College Democrats. So, you know, within this position, a lot has, you know, made me realize that though, you know, again, I oversee over about 20 chapters of College Democrats in the state. And so with, you know, all these different chapters at University of Texas in Austin, they have wonderful resources being in Austin. They have wonderful resources being the University Democrat since the 1950s. And so they 100% feel represented. Here at SFA, the reason I restarted the SFA College Democrats chapter was not just because I was a political science major, but because I wanted to be able to bring Democrats to campus. I wanted to be able to have a community and an organization where Democrats could come together and meet. You know, as the Democratic Party, this is definitely, in 2020, is seen as our moment to kind of prove ourselves. And I wanted to make sure we had that organizing structure so we could come together and I could say, hey, we have 9 House seats to flip until Texas turns blue. Let's get to work. And I wanted to be able to have that. But I never really thought about representation because I didn't really ask my teachers their political views. But I just knew the community that I had around me that were Democrats. And so I personally believe that we are a more conservative campus, but I do not believe that conservatives on this campus always feel comfortable in speaking out about what they believe in. And I do think that's a change. And as I was saying earlier to the college Republicans that were here, campuses thrive the best when both parties are represented on campus. And we can have these discussions and we can have this dialogue. And then also so we can organize individually because there's so much youth power with over the youth vote increasing by 500% from 2014 to 2018. We have so much power within the state. And if we're not organizing within our respective parties, what are we doing as college Democrats and college Republicans, right? So I hope that answers the question.
Okay, so as part of college Republicans, I would say that we are astounded, especially since we're starting back up this semester, of how many people want to come join our organization and don't feel that they have a place to voice their conservative beliefs on campus. I work with students with Trump also, and the one thing that I found troubling was that our president, Symphony, had to sit me down before we had an interview and ask me if I was okay with my name being in the pine log next to Students for Trump. And I said, yeah, I really don't care. I don't know why you have to ask me that question. And she realized, she told me, she was like, well, I'm afraid for your sake of retaliation against you. And I just found that so sad that we even had to have that discussion, and that some conservatives on campus do not feel that there is an outlet for them to represent themselves on campus. And that's why I think going to places like the First Amendment Club and YCT, or even to a college Dem meetings just to see what y'all's views are, is so important to part of that college experience. In college, we require that you get multiple views, not just views that you believe in.
Yeah, and that's part of the reason why I established the First Amendment Club, which I would highly encourage any of you to come to if you want to sit down and have civil discourse. It's all about uniting a country that's been so torn over partisan issues and trying to find out that we really do have more in common than we do different from each other. And we're divided by government and organizations as a result of that. And I think it's important that we all come to a place like First Amendment Club. And I'd even be willing to go to college Democrats. You know, I love civil discourse. I love free flow of ideas. And I wish there was more of that on campus.
I just want to add to this question. I feel absolutely represented well on this campus. I came from a very small town where everyone was straight, everyone was white, everyone was Christian. And coming here and getting to meet more people that have my views, that are Democrats, that are also part of the LGBT community, I feel like I really found myself moving here. And so when there are clubs like College Republicans and College Democrats and all of the caucuses, I feel like there are more places for people to go, and I just personally greatly appreciate that upon moving here.
I think I can say that on behalf of everybody here, I would just like to say thank you to the Pine Log for making this happen. Thank you so much, Raquel. The only thing that there's a lot of things that you can take away from what we talked about today, but get involved with your political organizations on campus. If you want to go to a YCT meeting, Students for Trump, you've heard everything that was talked about today. Go ahead, get involved in politics, use your voice, vote. I hope y'all were there yesterday, but yeah, just get involved. And like I said, thank you to Raquel. Thank you.
And I just want to quickly address what Josh said. That's not just an issue within your party and organization. I'm glad that you brought it up because I can speak for just about every college Democrat in the room that I know. What do I tell y'all before we do events like this? What do I tell y'all before we do anything public, right? What? Y'all aren't saying, yeah, I was gonna say, y'all aren't saying what I tell you. Right, anytime, college Republicans or Lumberjacks for Life is tabling, what do I put in the group chat? If you approach, be respectful. And, it's the same thing. It's like, I have to make sure they know, don't pop off on college Republicans or YCT, because not only does it make me look bad, but it also makes our organization look bad, makes our party look bad. And I hope that, obviously that the same conversations are happening within conservative organizations as well.
Yeah, I do want to say, I don't, tell my people what to do, but I do have a standard that they be respectful if they address any part of any y'all clubs or people related. And as for everyone, people who are wondering whether they should come up to our table and talk, we'll treat y'all respectfully. We have no intention of anything rude or disgusting or misusing what you say. So we just want to tell you guys that we're open to members and, whoever wants to talk and have a civil discourse.
I also do feel well represented here on campus as I am a part of Young Conservatives of Texas and College Republicans. Although I will say, I feel there is a issue of tolerance, which I feel sometimes is preached a ton, but also just not followed. For example, when I was tabling once for College Republicans, I had a few students come up to me calling me a race traitor and other slurs, but I just think that instead of calling those names, we need to actually you need to back your argument with fact and not just emotion, and it would just be more productive rather than calling me a race traitor or a bigot or anti-feminist or.
And another thing, I think it's important to know, we can talk about tolerance of thought and, just showing respect for each other. We can, hold hands and sing Kumbaya, but until you come to meetings, until you actively participate in being part of finding solutions and common ground, which all of you for coming to this event, it's amazing that you came, thank you so much. Coming to events like this and coming to First Amendment Club and YCT and College Democrats, all of those things are how you actively create change in the world around you, in your country, in your community. Also, First Amendment Club meets every other Wednesday at 6:30 in the Lady Jack's room.
Just to add on what everybody said, we progress with our voices as together. We don't, with discussion, we get more things done. And yes, go to these groups if you ever have an issue. It is always vitally important to talk about it. Your voice needs to be heard.
I just want to finally add, you heard a lot of views from a lot of people up here, and I can't speak for everyone up here, but I speak for my personal self. If you have any disagreements with me or any agreements with me, or you want to talk to anything about I said on the stage here today, I'm an open book. You can come talk to me. I'm the nicest guy you'll ever meet. So.
Alrighty guys, well that concludes our first ever Pine Log Jack Views.